Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. It may look like winter, but the calendar says it's spring, and that means the outdoor gardening season is getting closer. To get some early season gardening tips, we've called on a frequent contributor from the UVM Plant and Soil Science Department. It is a pleasure to welcome Leonard Perry. Great to see you again.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back, Judy.
To get started, you brought along some spring flowers to inspire us.
And there's just so much gardeners can be doing and thinking about this time of year. We'll be talking about some of these today, whether it be buying seeds, sowing seeds, making plans for this year, getting the tools ready, pruning, and attending garden events. And at the end of the show, we'll mention my website where I've got a list of a lot of events coming up the next 2 months. One being in Fort Ticonderoga, a garden symposium the first Saturday of April, full day just on gardening. But as you mentioned, flowers, and I'd like to thank Clausen's in Colchester for providing some of these seasonal flowers for us. This is a great time of year to find a lot of different flowers, and of course with this long winter we got to have some color inside, you know, whether you're a gardener or not, you know. So we'll just take a look at some of these. There are a couple that are actually perennial you can plant outside, this being one. This is a primrose. Now these come in reds and pinks and whites and bicolors and golds and all kinds of colors. They're low like this, and they're just early spring bloomer, and I just love the contrasting colors in this. So a primrose, they last well. All these last better with cooler temperatures, you know, maybe low 60s at night, high 60s, 70 at day in the house. But again, outside the primrose is good. And then of course you got to have some daffodils, whether you get a pot like this, whether you get cut ones. This is a miniature form called tete-a-tete. It's one that is hardy again. You can get it with some flowers out, some buds coming as you see here, and that's what you want to look for, some other buds coming along. Here's one coming up here. And again, this is one that when it finishes, just hold on to it, you know, keep it water, keep it green, and then when you can get out, plant it, you can just plant it outside. And this makes more and more each year. I've got a whole row of those out in the garden. So tete-a-tete daffodil is good. Now these two are not hardy.
These are inside plants only.
Now, if you live down where I grew up in Alabama, this would be hardy, you know. That's just what I miss this time of year.
So
but this is azalea, an evergreen type. Again, not hardy. There are some azaleas, more like rhododendrons, that are hardy, but they're not the evergreen type really up here. But reds and whites and pinks and bicolors like this. Another thing, in addition to cool, is not overwatered. You notice these are in foil and look nice, but if you water it, that water needs to drain out. So you might take it out of the foil, let it drain before you put it back in, put it in a saucer, protect furniture, but make sure that drains. So
now, if you do have one of these, it doesn't go outside. It just stays as a house plant.
It just stays inside, and again, cool, and you know, keeping it, you know, enough moisture to it. Just kind of feel with your hand. You can get a month to 6 weeks out of one of these, so they really last. So it's a good, you know, may pay a little more, but you really get a lot more value out of that. And of course, the Easter lily. We got to mention Easter lilies. You want to get one that's a good proportion to the pot. It's got leaves all the way down, like this one, and some flowers opening, some good buds. This has 3 flowers open and 3 coming along. Now, one of the things to notice with the Easter lily, of course, they have, when the flowers open, the little yellow pollen in there, and that gets on the stigma there, and it signals the plant that makes seeds. You're done. And so what you want to do, and growers will do, is just remove those. You just pull them off, and you get like these, where you have no yellow pollen on those.
Oh, okay.
And so the flowers will last much longer. So when those open, just pull the little yellow bits off. Don't get it on your clothes. It'll stain.
You're right.
But that should last well, too. Again, not hardy, but enjoy it for the season. And the fragrance is just lovely. One thing I should mention, though, we can't keep that in our house because we have cats, and these are toxic to cats. So if you have cats, you don't want to put that where they can chew on it.
And if you have any questions, obviously ask at the greenhouse.
Exactly.
Okay. So you also brought some seed sowing supplies?
I did. This is the time to sow seeds, and some of the things that, reasons you might want to sow seeds, of course, is just fresh. You know, you get the vegetables, and nothing like picking those fresh vegetables. You know what kind of culture they've had, and you can grow them without chemicals, so you know they're safe that way. But just a lot of things that saves money, a pack of seeds, and you can grow this tomato plants with all these tomatoes, save a lot of money there. Varieties, especially with potatoes, I really like to grow some different ones that you just don't find even at farmers markets. And it's just fun. Even if I don't get a lot of these seedlings planted out, it's just fun growing them this time of year and seeing the little things grow and grow the plants. Just the whole process. And so one of the things you want to, of course, have is a good soil, and you don't want soil, regular garden soil. You want a seed sowing mix, a potting soil, one that's organic, has a lot of, say, peat moss in it, and you want it a proper moisture. So you, in a bag, say, you can moisten it, and what you want is to make a ball in your hand like so. It holds together, but you push it with your thumb and it falls apart. That's a perfect moisture.
So it can't be too wet or too dry.
If you squeeze it and water comes out, that's too wet. Add some more soil. If you can't make a ball, then it's too dry. So you want it a good moist. That's one of the keys with that. And then, of course, you want containers. Now, there's several types. They're the peat pots. Now those are good for things like squash that really don't like transplanting. Cucumbers you want to plant out, and of course you start those much later, like in May, but you just put soil in those, and these are just compressed peat. They'll decompose, they'll get moist and decompose in the ground, or you can pull pieces off very easy. Then there are the other two types here. There's the unit like this. It's an entire, and you can sow in rows in this. The idea from sowing in rows and not just scattering is so if a disease starts, it goes down the row. It doesn't just spread through the whole flat. Plus, they're a little bit easier to take out that way. Some people like to do that. And if you have limited space, it's a good way to start and then transplant into units like this, cell packs. I like to start, if I've got room, into these cells, and then a lot of times we'll transplant into bigger cells or small pots. And again, this way you can very easily, once they're rooted, push them out of these and transplant them into the ground, into another pot. Or if disease starts damping off, in particular where the plants just fall over, that's from being too wet, they can just stay in a cell. It doesn't spread through the flat. So that's a reason for doing that.
Terrific.
So I mentioned watering. That is a key. Of course, the little seeds are right near the surface. You want to keep it watered maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Check and just give it a little sprinkle. Once they start growing, water a bit deeper.
And what about sun or light?
All right. Of course, they need light, and they need some warmth, a good temperature. If you have a heating mat, that's good to keep the temperature up. And brought a few pictures we can look at on some of the things for lights. If you don't have a window or want to start them, here's a simple grow light setup that I made. Just shop lights, a warm white and a cool white bulb in there. You see down the bottom there's a heating mat, but you can make these yourself. Or you can buy fancier units, spend a bit more, but they look really nicer if say these are going to be in a living space. And again, the heating mats, the lights, timers, maybe 16 hours a day. It's in about 6 inches above the seedling height. It's a good height for that. And then there are these small tabletop ones too, if you don't want to spend as much money. I've got one of these at home too, where especially if you're just starting a few this time of year, that's a good way to start.
And so, along with starting seeds and buying flowers, what other activities are there that people should be thinking about as spring is springing?
Well, one of the things that I should mention with starting seeds, a lot of times people want to, get the bug. You got to start everything now. You get all these seeds, but then the plants will get leggy. So on my website, I'll give at the end, I've got actually a couple leaflets that have tables that list when to start what. Now, it's a little bit late if you're going to start the real slow things like the begonias and pansies, but probably end up having to buy those this year. But now's a good time for things like geraniums and petunias. as far as vegetables now, but preferably maybe the first part of April for tomatoes and peppers.
Okay.
And then most of the vegetables toward the end of April, those that you don't sow outside. A lot of times, even ones you sow outside, you can get a head start on the season, especially ones that take a longer period to grow and mature. Start them inside a few weeks early, and then you can put them out as little transplants, whether it's in a peat pot or one of those cells, and then you get a much good jump on the season that way.
And this is also a good time to check on what's happening outside too with your plants.
Yeah, it is, and pruning is one of those activities I should mention that is a good thing to do, and some of the reasons, some of the things you want to do with pruning is to go out and look for crowded crossing branches, the 2 C's, and then the 3 D's, dead, diseased, or damaged stems. Now's a good time. The leaves aren't out. You can see the structure. You can really see what's going on with those. So any branches that are too thick or they're crossing, rubbing on each other, that's not good. And of course you can see what maybe the ice got or damaged ones. The thing you want to do is prune the summer flowering shrubs and trees. Now if you prune the spring ones, you're cutting off the spring flowers.
So leave your lilacs alone.
Yeah, leave the lilacs and forsythia, see what comes out, and then once it comes out, and don't get too anxious. If something looks dead, maybe you might want to wait if you're not sure. A lot of times I know even some dead wood on shrubs, whether it be a lilac, whether it be a rose, actually may come out. It may take longer, maybe the end of spring, but just be patient with some of that. But if it's obviously damaged, you'll need some pruners. And so I brought some just to show there basically a lot of types. They're hand pruners and ones with longer handles. You get bigger branches, but they basically have 2 types of blades. One is the anvil type, as you see here, and basically as you squeeze it, it has a flat surface and the blade goes against that flat surface. Well, what that can do is if it's a living stem, especially a herbaceous plant like a perennial, that can actually squeeze it a bit, and that's not good. So the anvil type pruners are best for dead or damaged material that you're taking off. And then there are the bypass. They're kind of like scissors here with these, and the blade actually goes by the bottom one here. Doesn't hit it, but goes by it. So that makes a much cleaner cut. It doesn't compress the stems. That's good for living tissue. So the bypass is good for the living, and the anvil type for more the dead branches. So a little holder for this, getting these nice and sharpened now. They can get sharpening stones at hardware stores. That's one thing I've got to realize cleaning these up. I've got to get these sharpened too. But there's some variations, of course, on these. Now this one is nice. Of course, there's right-handed, left-handed ones, but this one is neat because the actual part here turns.
Rolls up.
So it rolls. It's kind of an interesting feel. It's a little bit harder to get used to sometimes, but once you do, it's a wonderful feel. It's much easier. So the rotating handle, ergonomic ones, and this is one I got this year I'm very excited about. This is a ratchet one. Of course, I like the new tools. This is, of course, has the solid surface, so that's an anvil type. Use it more for the dead wood, but it has this ratchet mechanism. So I brought a piece of stick here we can look at. And what it does is you squeeze down a little bit and you hear it engage. You let up and then squeeze it again. It engages a little further, and then you do it again, and then it goes right through.
For those real thick branches.
And, for the real thick branches. So it's very easy. Whereas one of these, you just really have to mash down. It can really hurt your hands after a while if you don't have strength. So the ratchet pruners are just great. So I'm excited to get out and do some pruning with those.
And of course, people should be thinking ahead a little bit if they're interested in your garden tours.
Right. I should mention we have a garden tour this summer, which is actually almost full. So if you're interested, go to the website we'll mention next. But we're going to gardens of Western New England, and Charlie Nardozzi's along to co-host it, as he does each year with the tour. It's an overnight tour down to Lenox, Mass. We'll be seeing the Berkshire Botanic Garden, a lot of historic gardens like Edith Wharton's The Mount, Robert Todd Lincoln's Hildene. We'll be going to Fort Ticonderoga to the King's Garden, Berkshire Botanic Gardens, and we'll be going to Hancock Shaker Village to see their historic horticulture and gardening. And also we'll have an authentic authentic shaker dinner there, complete with music. So
Oh,
should
no
be a
kidding.
fun trip. So again, my website, I've got that. I've got information about starting the seeds on it, all the garden events. You can look for all those. Perry's Perennial pages, perrysperennials.info or .com, and just look for the garden tours, the leaflets, or the garden events.
Terrific. And once again, thanks to our friends at Clausen's.
Yeah. Well,
For
thank Chris
providing
at
us.
Clausen's for providing these, and a little bit of spring, a little fragrance of spring from the lilies.
There's hope.
There is hope yet. It will come.
Thanks a lot, Leonard. And thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.